Hi, everybody. So, like the slide says, I'm Lee Barker. I want to thank Product-Led Summit for having me speak. This is one of the first conferences I've ever gone to in person. Part of that was due to the pandemic, but also one of the first. I'm very excited to be here. It's also one of the first times I've ever gotten to speak at a conference. So I do apologize if it is choppy or there's a lot of ums. As a traditional product manager, I'm lowering expectations so that way then if I do over deliver, the message will have been managed originally. Like I said, my name is Lee Barker and my pronouns are she, her. Even that statement right there at the end of that, saying that my pronouns are she, her, is one of the biggest drivers that allowed me to feel comfortable in the tech space, to allow me to go through a transition when I got to Toast a couple years into working in the tech industry. I remember when I first started out in my career, I was answering phones for TD Bank, and what John said about if you want to get into product management and you want to change industries, do one or the other. So when I started off in finance and I wanted to move towards product management, I really didn't feel quite comfortable in the banking space just due to the nature of how the companies were set up. They were very large, they're very draconian, and the inclusivity there, while was talked about at certain times, never felt like it was practiced year round. If it was, oh, this month we're focusing on this group because that's this month's group that we need to focus on, but then 11 months out of the year that group is never mentioned. And when I moved from a large banking institution over to Toast, where I really felt like they've emphasized inclusivity, not just every day, but every week. They focused on it with executive leadership. They had a lot of different things that you see kind of today that are kind of standard practice, like large groups on Slack and our communicators of different things that people wanted to be vocal about, people wanted to organize events for. And Toast really embodied that all the way up to the founders, which was amazing, because when you have that type of executive buy-in, that isn't just, hey, I showed up at the meeting and I was here and now I'm going to leave. It was, no, they showed up, they were engaging, they helped be the executive sponsors of different movements, and really made me start to feel comfortable as I went there. So when I first got to Toast, I was not this person you see for you today. And a lot of people that go through a transition, if you ask them, they would say, yeah, if I could just go home and then come back the next day and have it all be over, have it all be transitioned over, they would. But that's not the world we live in today. And that's why I keep mentioning the company Toast and these other tech spaces within the tech community, because they allowed me to feel comfortable to be able to say, you know what, I can do this. I already see people in their auto signatures putting their pronouns. I see people that have gone through similar situations at the company that I was at through a transition, and everyone was very accepting, and it was never made a big fanfare, big to do, because it was just like, yeah, this is just what, some people come in and they wear a jacket, some people wear a beanie, some people go through a transition. It was very, very just understanding and inclusive. And I would say that one of the biggest things that also helped me there was their DEI leadership, which met with the executives on a regular cadence. I think she met with them weekly. Her name was Sarah Castle. She is a great person, because I remember when I met with her, because I was talking to my boss about this, and she was like, why don't you meet with Sarah? And I remember when she sat down with me, it wasn't until if I didn't see that trust to the whole company of my time that I was there, of that people were going to be inclusive, people were going to be accepting, and people were going to be supportive, I never even wanted to have sat down with a person like that, because I'd say, what's that good going to do? She's just going to feed me some company lines and then nothing's going to happen. But it was that cross the company, message of, yes, you can bring your whole self to work and you can be your whole self, because we care about the work that you're doing and being yourself, as opposed to just showing up and filling a chair, that it made me feel comfortable enough to sit down with a person like that. So I remember when I sat down with her and I told her about what I wanted to do. I said, look, I'm trying to work on my gender transition. At the time I was very male presenting, and I was going to transition over to the woman I am today. Some of the first things she said was like, all right, so, I want you to let you know that we feel very honored that you want to do this here. And that was kind of the first time that I felt like that the company was thankful that I was willing to stay and go through this, because they valued me as a person, and they valued me for the work that I was doing and what I brought to the table as, as a culture fit, as an employee, and not just like, hey, we don't care about anything else you're doing other than, the numbers at the end of the day. So right away, I felt that connection. And that was kind of something that I hadn't seen at other companies that I worked at before, because I really felt that they valued me as a person. Then I started talking to her about the timeline that I was going to do this on. And I remember I said, you know what, it was right around Thanksgiving. And I remember I was going to tell her, hey, I was thinking maybe spring because, that would give me more time, make me feel comfortable. And because of the trust that had already been instilled with the conversations I'd been having with her and the trust I had in the company, she said, hey, why don't we move this up? Why don't we move this to December? Because everyone goes on vacation for the end of the year. When people come back, it'll be not only a new year, but you'll be able to bring the right person to work that you've always wanted to be. And I go back to it, if I never really felt that type of trust and, belief that the company had my back, just like I had the company's back to do the work that I needed to do, I never would have taken her plan seriously, and I never would have looked to embrace that support. And I remember when I started to come out to my individual team, because at the time I was running one Scrum team with I had about 5 engineers and 1 embedded QA, and an engineering manager who was split across 2 teams. And I remember when I came out to each one of them, the support was overwhelming. And in fact, one of my engineering managers, one of my lead engineers, he actually told me about how one of his children is non-binary. They have, actually has a best friend that had transitioned. And had I not felt again that I guess just comfort and security of knowing that they were going to have my back and that I wasn't going to be ostracized, and I wasn't, because these are things that were running through my head and run through a lot of transgender people's heads, is that hey, I don't know if the company's going to accept me for who I am. I'm probably going to have to change companies. And I thought that too. And I remember when I came out to all of the people on my team, the overwhelming support was so strong that it allowed me to continue to stay at that company until, unfortunately, the pandemic hit and we were downsized. But that's a different story. But it just really made me feel comfortable. And I remember after I messaged IT and I said, hey, I need to change my name information over. I updated it with HR. Again, Sarah Castle was very instrumental in bringing all the right people. I would never have known who to go out to individually and reach out to had I not had that network of people within the company and the belief and the faith that they were going to help support me. I think another thing too that was really, really meaningful was that we had at Toast every year. They have like an annual kickoff where they bring everybody in the company from across the country into Boston, and they do like basically a conference like this but for Toast stuff. And it's like they show off company vision, and they have a bunch of parties to try to say thank you for what you're doing. And I remember one of the founders came up, and I had worked with them very closely because, again, as product managers and as product-led organization, we would meet with them. We would meet with some of the founders very regularly because they would attend our product meetings. They would help talk strategy with us, and he had gotten to know me very well as the person that I joined the company as. And without even missing a beat, when he came up to me, it was the same exact conversation of, hey, what have you been working on? I'm really glad you're here. Really glad but with all the correct pronouns and name and sure. And I just remember that being so meaningful, because here's someone who could very easily not have to put in this effort. He could very easily not have created a culture like this, because Toast at the time was basically doubling its revenue before the pandemic, and was one of Boston's leading tech companies. And he didn't have to do that, but he did. And I think that was one of the big things that really helped instill that community within that company. And I think what a lot of the things today that I don't want to say that I take for granted, or I don't want to say that the industry takes for granted, but having the spaces that allow people to voice who they are, supporting them, and having it not just be, hey, it's January, we need to support this group, but February, nobody cares anymore. It's showing that support month after month, day after day. And it can be as simple as having those conversations on a regular basis, and having and supporting the DEI groups that within your organization with that level of intensity. Because again, a lot of these journeys, the journey that I took is, when I look back on it, was made a lot easier because of the community and support that I had from, the company that I work for. And overall, my career growth since then has been significantly improved, because now I feel a lot more comfortable to be able to be who I am. I'm not spending half of my effort thinking, well, I'm not really happy with the person I am. I'm just going to try to do enough to get by so I can just manage how terrible I'm feeling about who I am and how uncomfortable I'm feeling. It allowed me to say, you know what, I'm happy with who I am. And I know that the companies I work for are happy. It doesn't matter that I'm a transgender woman. I can now do my best work. And the output of that is me being able to, grow my career from being an associate product manager a couple of years ago to now a senior product manager, taking on multiple teams and being able to have a talk like this, because the tech space has really empowered me to do that. And I just want to let everybody know here that I want to thank all of you for helping to promote that, because as product managers, even though it has manager in the title, we're not actual managers, which I always find is the best conversation I have with people that are in ops or that are product managers. We are looked to as leaders, and we are looked to as people that are help driving the company, drive strategy, and it's our how we represent that and how we represent ourselves and how we interact with other groups that should be included in things is what's helping to drive the tech space to be as inclusive as it is. And I am a perfect example of how that empowerment has helped me and made me feel more comfortable. So I know it's right before lunch, and I also know that I don't have much more else because I didn't get a chance to prepare much else due to something I had to take care of that led up to Basin today. But I would like to just open this up to questions. If there aren't any, no worries. And I just want to thank all of you for hearing me out.
All right. Thank you so much. That was great. Again, we've got the Slido, so feel free to put in any questions. I forgot to mention, I keep thinking about it. Feel free, we have, as you're putting in questions, the Product-Led Alliance on Twitter, if anybody wants to tweet out hashtag PLED Alliance and also at PLED Alliance. So do that, but let's go to some questions. How can teams support some of the DEI efforts and individuals, whether or not the company is fully supportive in your experience?
I would say that, and John's talking up here, I was kind of jogged my memory on when I was at Toast, is that, we would incorporate, inclusive efforts or, DEI level efforts at the OKR level. And now granted, that does go back to a bit of the organization and the company being supportive of DEI. But overall, if you could wrap that into some of the things that you're doing, and it also ties into the metrics of delivery, say like, hey, we want to make sure that, we are, incorporating these, missions or initiatives that are DEI related into our delivery. That can also help be a way to kind of to get around a company not being fully supportive, but also saying, hey, if we deliver this, we also get that. And I know you want that. So why are you going to stop us from doing this over here if it's going to help you get that? And I think it's not trying to pick one or the other, it's tying them together so that way that you can get DEI into things that are going to be measured for delivery.
Yeah, well, that's great. You mentioned, as you were mentioning, like the changing your name, like through all the systems, that kind of brought up, like, what are some of the hidden challenges that many people may not be aware of?
I think one of the biggest hidden challenges are, one for me was being able to track down all of the things that you are logged into and all the things that have that. And I think a lot of times, remember that first talk this morning where we talked about single sign-on. That actually was helpful because we had a lot of, everything was kind of tied in together. We didn't have too many different systems that were working together. So that way, updating my name for one made it a lot easier. But I also think too, it was having an IT team and having a point of contact that was very supportive of DEI in general. So that way they knew, hey, I'm going to go the extra mile for you because I know how important this is. Because I think I worked with someone who was in the LGBTQI space in IT who helped me who helped me get everything updated. And if I found something like a couple of weeks later that, I forgot about this, I was able to reach out to them and they were able to correct it immediately because they knew the gravity and they had the compassion for how important this is, because that is sometimes the simplest thing can go like a really long way, especially when you're early on in this kind of journey, because you're already having a lot of self-doubt in your own head. It's kind of like going on like going into product management for the first time. You're having to, speak in front of people, you're having to make recommendations, you have to challenge other people's thoughts, other people's ideas, and you've never been able to position to do that before. Sometimes, it's having that support around you being like, yeah, no, you got this. No, that's a good question, is sometimes the best thing you can do in the beginning of something like this.
Great. What are some of the best ways to support transitioning or recently transitioned coworkers, especially small, meaningful gestures like you were just talking about that maybe many people don't think of?
I think some of the biggest things that helped me were I remember one of my coworkers when I told them, hey, I'm going to be, when I get back from holiday, this is what it's going to be like. Everything's going to be different. And he was super supportive. He was like, well, do you want like a banner? Do you want like, and I was like, no, I honestly just want it to be like any other day because that's how I'm living my life. And a lot of times I've heard of this is like people are like, oh, so brave, you're so strong, you're so in like, so like, I'm like, well, you get up and you brush your teeth every day. You get up and you like, you put gas in your car. For me, it's like I get up and this is just what I have to do now. So it's a lot of the way to answer that, to loop back around to that question is to be supportive, sometimes just ask. Because a lot of times, people are going to feel more comfortable if you ask them instead of just doing it. And also sometimes just engaging that conversation and showing them that they're seen and that you recognize that there's an effort happening and that you want to be as helpful as you can. Sometimes they might just say what I said, which is just go about our day. Like, I know we're going to be this meeting together. If you see my hand raised or make a comment, instead of saying he, say she, or instead of saying she, say he, and just a lot of times asking for that and being supportive that way instead of making the assumption, I think is some of the best ways you can be supportive.
Yeah, that's great. Why do you think the tech space is or has been so supportive? And do you think that other spaces are supportive, or is there something specific about tech space?
That is a really interesting question to answer. And, I've seen other companies, like Starbucks is an example of, a very, very strong pillar in the LGBTQI community and being inclusive. And, they make coffee. They're a coffee shop. But I think what led the tech space to that is because the value of I think, bringing diverse minds together as of late. And also, I think the fact that tech was so new, there wasn't a lot of draconian, systems in place. There wasn't a lot of, people from, that had really old ways of thinking being brought into it, that it could start with a fresh group of minds is one of the things that maybe had that. But again, that's a question that I would probably need a lot more time to think about.
Sure.
That is a great question to think about, because I honestly don't know, and I'm also very, very lucky that I kind of stumbled into it because it allowed me the space to be the person.
Yeah. Well, building off that, like what can the tech space do better to be more supportive?
I think it's just continue to have more conversations, and also I think it's continue to have executive and founding leadership be supportive, not just on paper. Have them be the executive sponsor of an initiative, or go into the Slack group that's talking about a specific aspect of a community that has been that is looking for inclusivity, and have them chime in. I remember at Toast, our founder would chime in on some of the Slack messages, even though he'd be in like a meeting with Goldman Sachs or something talking about funding, but he would still be chiming in if he was off site, because he knows how important it is to have his voice not only there but also show, I'm here, I hear you, and I'm responding. And I think seeing that leadership from the top down will inspire people, the leadership underneath them, and help show that, hey, the boss of bosses is in on this. Why aren't we involved in this thing?
Yeah, no, that's great. What was it like joining a new company after Toast?
I think it was, at first it was just very nerve-wracking, because I was still pretty early on, and I remember after Toast, they let us go in April of 2020. And I remember I was interviewing a couple months after that. And I remember I started to realize that I was running into being interviewed because I was a transgender woman. And it would be an interesting interview. It would make the recruiters show diversity, even though at the end of the day, I was getting a lot of, I would get right up into the final round, but then I felt that I was very qualified for it. But then I just felt that it was a lot of, hey, we're bringing you here for this because you should help make us feel like we're being more diverse. I remember one guy that I interviewed with, he was a founder. He went on unprompted about how inclusive they were with LGBTQI, and I was like, "That's great," but I thought we were talking about what do you want me to do here? And I thought this was an interview, and I felt like I started to realize that sometimes people wanted to have those conversations with me to make themselves feel better about it. And I think the best things that have happened is over time, I've had to just look at more tech companies that are very inclusive, that look either on paper more inclusive, or I have to have those conversations felt out, because it was definitely different at first, but now I've kind of been at this for over 2.5 years. I don't really think about it as much. So it's not a great answer, because sometimes time does heal all, but ultimately that is what it took for me to feel a lot more comfortable.
Great. And then do you know of any good resources you can recommend to companies to help them?
I would say, turn to the people within your company that are, diverse and that are, of different communities, like of the LGBTQI space, other, nationalities, because they're the ones who are living as themselves every day. So they're going to be the best source for that. And also it shows that you're turning to the people within your company as opposed to bringing in some outside consultant to tell you how to be more diverse. Like, no, turn to the people that you have in your own company because they're going to be the best leaders. They're going to be the best voices for it. And also people are going to connect with them. They're going to say, hey, I work with that person. Like that's awesome. I know them. I've talked to them. I've done calls with them. Hopefully soon, eventually, we'll be having lunch with them again, maybe, depending on what company you're at. And I think that is going to be some of the best because they're going to know what the best resources are for things they represent. I know for me, I turned to some of the groups we already had. I also turned to local, in Boston, thankfully, there was a ton of transgender support groups. And I turned to them for support and resources and brought that back to my company. So look within your company, then look locally, and then look to see how you can merge the two.
Awesome. All right. And last question, thoughts on how companies, we're in Pride Month right now, and thoughts on how companies, change their logos to rainbow logos and how maybe we can do that better.
I think when I see that question and when I think about it, I think about, you rewind like 30 years. You would never see any of that today. So even though it may seem very kind of kitschy and very oh, they're just getting on the bandwagon, at least there's a bandwagon for them to get on. And I think about myself, I would never have dreamed of doing a transition 20 years ago, let alone 10 years ago. So the progress that we made, while it may look like, commercialization, at the end of the day, that's still more so than we had 30, 40, 50 years ago. I think about, someone trying to transition in the 1950s. Forget it. Or someone trying to be openly, in the LGBTQI space 30 years ago. Not going to happen that easily. So while it can be done better, and I think the ways that it can be done is just not just showing a rainbow logo, but showing their local support of the areas they're at. Like, some of the, I think Target is another company that does a pretty good job, I want to say, but that might just be me speaking from my own experiences with Target. But they're very, very great on local support and being inclusive and having it not just be, hey, it's Pride Month, and then last month was Asian American Pacific Month, and next month is this. It's like they really try to be, at least on the outside, more inclusive year round. So to answer that question, I think it'd be done better by being more year round. But I think I'm still going to be thankful for where we are today because it has come a long way.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great.